I was so stressed that I didn't even know I was stressed because it was an everyday feeling that I learned to manage it, that I'm like, I'm not stressed.
Hey everyone, I'm Morgan and Debaun, a passionate entrepreneur and life advisor. With the Journey podcast, you'll discover that success isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've taken control of their lives. Join me on my own journey to discover the secret sauce behind reaching success with permission from no one else. Okay, welcome back to the Journey podcast. It is your lovely host, Morgan Debaun. I'm so excited today because Tiffany is here with us to talk all about personal finance, and we're going to get into some of the more traditional finance one-on-one. So I've been spending a lot of time on this podcast talking about wealth and how to think about wealth. We have a lot of high earners who listen to this podcast, whether people who are entrepreneurs who have figured out how to scale their business and are now becoming millionaires for the first time. And then we have quite a few people who are traditional 9-to-5ers, whether they work in tech or they've got a dual household income, and they're like, I want to retire early. I feel like I'm on the rat race. I'm making money, but I'm spending money. Okay. Yeah. And then we've got some solo aspiring entrepreneurs. So people who have day jobs but are looking to transition from side hustle to main hustle, which is so difficult to do in this economy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Tiffany and I met probably at Summit 21.
Yeah, I literally, a picture, it was so crazy, like 2 days ago, a picture of us popped up on my phone, like Google Photos. It was like in the hallway at Summit 21. I'm like, oh my God, what a small world. Yeah.
So crazy. I feel like that was forever ago when we were all just like little baby CEOs, baby influencers. Now you're like New York Times bestselling author, inspiring us all. I also was just with Jabril, and he was telling me how you're living your best life and spending more time on you. So we'll talk about that as well. But thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. But yes, I remember Summit 21, and I think I saw you again at Essence Fest after that. Yeah, it's been a long time and a long journey. It's so interesting to see where people are now from where we first started.
I know. I'm in Chicago today, and I was thinking about Levy, and I met Levy in 2017, like at our first version of Summit 21, which was called Empower Her.
Okay, yes.
Like right when her first book came out.
It's so crazy because I was just with Levy 2 days ago. 2 days ago, we were at this mastermind called Author for Authors. And we were just like, it was in Nashville. And it was just some of your favorite authors, like the guy who wrote Profit First, Jeff Walker, who wrote Launch, Hal, I forget Hal's last name, who wrote A Miracle Morning. Just in this room, just sharing information and like kind of brain dumping together. So yes, it's like the people that you kind of came in with, it's good to see that many of them are still here, still connecting,
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, we're going to have to talk about the book thing in a second because, I'm writing my book right now.
Ooh.
So we'll come back to that. So first, let's start with the people. So it's a really tough economy right now. It's like very weird, right? The stock market is going back up.
Yeah.
A lot of people may have maybe missed that ride and kind of had their money sitting because they were scared. And I work a lot with people in the tech industry, particularly because of Afrotech and the community we've built there. And so a lot of people are scared about getting into tech because they're seeing these layoffs. What I see on my end is actually that people are getting laid off or typically getting hired if they're technical within like 30 to 45 days. They're not necessarily out of a job forever, but it's still tons of anxiety.
Yeah.
And then you've got the younger generation who's trying to enter the workforce and they're like, you guys are nuts. I actually would prefer not to participate in this capitalist society. What's your perspective? What's your community feeling right now? Like, how are you feeling about the economy?
To your point, I actually have a friend who has so much money sitting outside, like many, 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 many M's. I'm like, in what, girl? Like, it's because she's just like, meanwhile, I mean, she's like an investment like guru. And she's just like, I'm just nervous about this market. I don't know if I want to put it to work just yet. I know I missed out on a lot of money, but something is just telling me like this market is making me nervous, But then I get a lot of like just regular everyday friends who don't have many, many, many M's who are being laid off. And to your point, if they don't have a specific technical skill, it's been months and they're still looking for work. And then even in the entrepreneur space, I mean, I had to lay off a number of people over the last 2 years. And so many of my entrepreneur friends are in that same space because your company's just not making enough to sustain. And it's really hard, to lay people off. But it's
Right.
like, do we all sink with the ship, or do we try to save some of us? And so across
Yeah.
the board, it's a tightening of the belt across the board is what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what happened in COVID was that, and we've seen these numbers, but basically in COVID, people saved a lot more than they've ever saved. So the savings of the average American went up like 5x, like incredible savings. And now everyone's spending it down.
Yeah.
And I was just at a JP Morgan conference. The estimate is like by the end of Q1 of next year, people's savings will be back to where they were pre-COVID.
Yeah. Because you have to also understand that it's not just people are just wilding out and just spending. However, you're outside now, and that outside costs, it costs to travel.
Inflation.
Yes.
Inflation ate it.
Yes. It costs to look a certain way. It costs. So, it's not, I think sometimes people think, oh, because people are being responsible. And sure, certainly that might play a role. But, when you're inside and there's really nothing to do, it's much easier to save money. But what I've just been cautioning, anybody that follows me as the Budgetnista is that now is really the time to start looking and tightening your belt. You don't have to super tighten. I call that the noodle budget. Like if you had to eat ramen noodles budget, right? So I don't believe in living there, but I believe in knowing what that number is, just in case I have to drop down and get my noodle on for like a few months. Like if I have to pull all the way back, what's my number? What's kind of like a halfway point to that number? And what's my regular everyday life? What I've seen is that people will be in foreclosure, but also have cable on. It's like at some point, it's like, well, if the ship is sinking, what are some things I can throw off the boat? And so that by knowing your numbers before the ship gets its first leak. And so that's first and foremost. What are your numbers? How much does it cost to run your life? How much do you absolutely need? And if you had to, where could you make the drop down? And not just that, where could you add money? Because, we know that it's not just enough to you can't budget your way to wealth and security. Well, if I had, I call it the Bank of Tiffany. If I had to type into the Bank of Tiffany, and I did this experiment last night because I have a bunch of mentees and they're always asking me all these questions about how to make money. And I'm like, well, one of the things is that I bank on myself. And so the Bank of Tiffany, I did an experiment where I said, well, if I was going to do, I'm not doing this because I'm tired. If I was going to do one-on-one coaching for a year, and I'm only taking 10 people, and every month we meet up. But not only do I coach you, I'm also a sponsor in that I connect you to the attorneys you need, accountants, all these other things. And I said, right now, 10 people, $10,000. That's how much it costs to work with me. How many people would be like, girl, say less, I take credit cards?
100. Right?
And so just in that little bit of time, so I was like, I'm just going to count this first 1 minute, 20 people. Yes, 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 yes. And I said, that's over $200,000 right there. And so that's the Bank of Tiffany. So I know mentally always in my mind, I'm like, if I have to drop down, I know the places that I could pull things out and say, I don't need to buy that. But I also know, conversely, what I could do if I needed to make money. I can make six figures within a matter of moments. I know everyone doesn't have that availability, but it might be Uber. It might be, you know what? I am really good at making those cakes that people always ask me. It might be
babysitting.
Exactly. Because that's what I did when I first started. I was a preschool teacher. So I babysat, I tutored. So knowing your numbers on both sides are going to be critical to survive any sort of financial upheaval.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm also finding that some people who have tight money issues are also working really hard, but they're struggling within I'm burnt out and I'm tired. And it looks like everyone else around me is going to the Beyonce concert in Paris. And meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out how I pay for this daycare, right? So that I can I'm working backwards. I'm treading water. That's the sense that I get from people. They feel like I've got two kids, they're going to school or they're in daycare. My job pays me just enough to pay for their daycare.
Yeah.
So should I just quit? My perspective to someone who's feeling that is actually no, you shouldn't quit because daycare is temporary. At some point, your kids are going to go to school and you've taken yourself out the workforce. Yeah. Have you encountered those types of scenarios before when you're coaching and mentoring people?
You literally are talking about one of my very best friends. She 2 kids in daycare. It was costing her $2,200 a month.
That's not even that bad compared to some things I've heard, but that's still crazy.
Right? I mean, and she's an engineer. This is not someone who's not educated. And then on top of that, rent was $2,300. And I just remember thinking, how does one manage in this space like this? And so one of the things she started to do is she had to look for resources. So there were rental assistants, there's food assistants. I know it sounds so crazy, but sometimes that's what it looks like. you know?
Yeah.
And she started to look for research. I mean, everything from internet, like, oh, there's a way to get internet for free if you've got XYZ. Oh, there's like, there's health insurance that you can get, like childcare insurance that you can get for kids. Even there are programs that will pay for childcare for you. Lots of these programs exist and no one takes advantage, and the money sits there and goes back to the state or federal government from whence it came. And so like that was one of the things she got really good at, finding programs to assist and help, while she also worked. I wish I would have known when I was like 15 years ago when I was starting the Budgetnista and I was renting a room, and literally going to like networking events so I could be like, ooh, I'm pretty sure there's going to be food there. I wish I would have known that like I could have applied for assistance, because I had nothing. I lost my job. The recession hit really bad. I couldn't even afford gas for the little car that I did have. And I could just barely afford my $500 a month for that room. I think
there's a stigma around it. And, it's in the media and in movies and entertainment. It looks like you don't want to be that person. But in reality, the majority of America is right above the threshold for qualifying for most of those things. And if you have kids, oftentimes it's the threshold is higher than you think.
Yeah. And then reaching out, because one of the ways she was able to learn about those programs, it was through another friend of mine who is a social worker, and was like, girl, let me tell you the programs that no one's applying for. The money's just sitting there. And so like sometimes I know it's really hard, but finding your safe circle to say, yo, I'm actually having a really hard time. Is there anything can you pass on my resume? A friend of mine just started a business. It's not doing well. And I was telling my friend Cabral, who's been in business, like he has a legacy business. His family started it 60 years ago. And he was like, why don't we have like a business circle? And I was like, well, what is that? He was like, this weekend, I'll gather like 4 other entrepreneurs. Your friend can share like her issues, her challenges, and we will just share our knowledge. Like, well, call such and such. And I was like, because I do that naturally with my friends, but I had not brought someone in to literally just pour into you our knowledge, our resources, who we know, what we know. And I thought, wow, how beautiful is that? So reaching out to people is also an asset and a resource available to you, hopefully.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to consider that. And no matter what level you're at, there's always someone who is at your level or has been where you have been. And I really think advisors, a lot of times people look for mentors, and I think people should look for advisors. Like people who can solve the problem, not people that just hear you and give you feedback. You need people who have solutions. So look for your advisors in your life, folks. Okay, switching gears a little bit. So let's say someone is 9-to-5er, dual household income. Let's say someone's doing like 150, their partner's doing around 150. So they're doing well. Maybe they live in Texas. Maybe they live in DC. So not like the lowest cost of living, but not necessarily New York and LA. They want to retire early. This is a scenario. I'm not making this up. People sent in scenarios for our conversation today. They want to retire early, but they also have like a kid. So they're in their early 30s. What are the things that people should be thinking about if they have a good budget, $300K of income coming in, but they have some expenses? What are some things that people should be thinking about as they're just trying to design their life to retire, before 50?
So you have to do the math, right? So you want to dial on back and ask yourself, okay, well, how much do I want to live off of like annually when I no longer have to work? Let's pretend like the house will be paid off, the cars will be paid off, because ideally during retirement, that's the ideal. So you might say, I would like to do $200,000 a year. If I didn't have like extra bills to pay, $200,000 allows us to like travel, not think about it. All right. So then I lean into something called the 4% rule, which is if you were going to live off of 4% of the money that you have invested, because on average, every year, of course, it fluctuates super high, super low. For the last really almost 100 years, the return in the market has been about 10%, but let's just say conservatively 7%. So if you live off 4%, then conservatively speaking, it still gives you space in case it doesn't return that bare minimum of 7%. So then now, okay, I need to have $5 million invested into the market in some way in order to yield my $200,000 a year plus comfortably. So now you have your number. I like to call it putting something on the board. Because in my mind, I always have this board, like a cork board that I'm putting something. I'm like, ooh, 5 million, that's my number. Okay, now you do the work backwards. Now the thing is, it seems like, well, I got to save 5 million. No, because you're also going to grow to 5 million. Like how much do I have to put in and what's my
Mm-hmm.
time frame? If I'm 30 and I want to invest and I want to retire by 40, I have 10 years to get my current assets to $5 million. So then you start looking at, well, how much money do we have to set aside monthly or annually to invest?
Mm-hmm.
And if I assume a moderate return of 8%, what is that going to look like? How much,
Mm-hmm.
so you're not going to have to you're not going to have to save 5 million. Maybe it's like 4, but also too, you might tell yourself, okay, there are other assets. Maybe you start a business. Maybe it's real estate. Like for me, I have multiple ways to get to my number. I have several
Mm-hmm.
businesses. I don't heavily invest in real estate, moderately so, but that is one of my
Mm-hmm.
things. And I'm also in the market to get to my number, where I'm like, right now I'm work optional, but there's I ain't never got to worry again number that I have,
Ever. Yeah. Yeah. We outside for real.
Exactly.
Numbers.
And so I have that number where I'm just like, okay, so what do I need? And I have a financial advisor, Anjali, who's awesome, who I like working with her because, especially as a business owner, she does my business and she does me personally. And so I know my number. I just met with her yesterday and we were just going over. She said, at your current savings rate, Tiffany, you have a 70% chance of reaching your number and hitting there by the age that you're wanting. And I was like, what do I need to up that? Because now know,
like 70% ain't enough.
Exactly. That's what she was telling me. Basically, she was like, girl, give me some more money. I was like, okay. I'm like, well, what if I give you? So, but and one of the things, not everyone needs a financial advisor, but to me, once you
I think everyone does need a financial advisor.
Well, I'll say, if you're a preschool teacher making $30,000, the cost might be prohibitive, so there are ways around, but I'll say this, so you might, if I was a preschool teacher and this was me like 20 years ago making $39,000 a year, the way I would access a financial advisor is to pay for maybe an annual call once a year. And it's like $150 an hour. So maybe $300 a year I invest for someone to create my plan. And then I got to work my plan. And as I made more and more money, now like Anjali specializes in high net worth individuals who have businesses. And so she's awesome because a financial advisor is not just there to grow your money. That's actually just a small component. They're there to hold a certified financial planner, to be clear. That is the gold standard of financial advisors.
Fiduciary.
Yes. And because a certified financial planner has to have a certain number of years that they've been doing the work. They have to keep up the certification. They have to be a fiduciary. And what I like about Anjali is not only is she a certified financial planner, she's also a CPA. So the business, for me, that was important because I just sent her my business taxes. She was like, girl, they missed this, and this. I said, yes, thank you. This is why I pay you money. Plus I get to also pay her through my business, and so it's a write-off. I was not fully convinced, quite honestly, that a financial advisor might be worth the full amount of money until my husband passed away like a year and a half ago. And thankfully we started working with Anjali about 2 or 3 years before he passed away. And so she knew our whole financial life. The first year and a half, 2 years, you're literally just giving her everything you can find, all your bank statements. He worked for the city of Newark, his pension, everything. And so when he passed away, I could not have possibly waded through all of that. She had like a checklist of things. She's like, here's who owes you money. Here's to what amount. Here's where it should be. I mean, it just, and then she worked with my estate planning attorney and she worked with my CFO. And then, so it just, it made me realize that this is so much more than just make me more money on my money.
Yes.
It was like holistically, so even now I have like a trust set up. Anjali helped to review that. And here's what we're going to put in there. So if something were to happen to me prematurely or whatever, I'm not worried about my family. I already told them, you reach out to Anjali. She has everything. My estate planning attorney. She has it. They know where everything is.
And this is what people miss. I actually had my wealth advisor. I did a video like a couple of months ago and I talked about being rich versus being wealthy. And the internet was like, this bitch is out of touch, basically. And I was like, no, I'm not out of touch. And so I actually brought my wealth advisor, Adam, on a couple episodes ago to talk about this because I think that it is overwhelming. You have probably hundreds of inputs every single day. And you need someone who does this every single, they do this every single day with people that are just like you, if not bigger than you.
Better than Because I love when Anjali's like my $100 million client. I'm like, yes, because when I get there, I know you're ready, right? I don't want you to learn on me. Like,
please no. Please no. And it can be tough in our community for people to talk about this stuff because there is so much like we are privileged. We do
Yes.
carry a lot of responsibility and privilege to be able to have the trust attorney, the wealth advisor.
Yeah.
I have my small business accountant.
Yes.
Is separate from my wealth advisor.
Same.
But they talk. All three of them talk.
Talk.
I'm like,
yeah.
y'all be have meetings without me.
Girl. Yes. That meeting is so powerful.
Let me know.
And what I love is that, like, I love to look because Anjali is Indian, Tony is Black, and my accountant is Black. So I love it's all these brown women in the room. I'm like, look, it's the Black girl courtroom, like from the Black Lady sketch show. I just
like the
yes. So I love. I mean, it was like intentional, not intentional. Like I was just looking for the best, and after interviewing. Right. This is who the best showed up. I actually was just talking to Tony, my attorney, this morning because I was like, she does other like legal things for me. But I love it is so important to build your team so they can catch things. And then also too, like I was making the decision, for example, Morgan, and I know you've had to probably make a decision like this, like, do I go from S Corp to C Corp?
Right.
Like, and so
for your personal business, absolutely.
Yes. And so, but then it's like, well, Anjali's like, wait, let me weigh in on the personal side of Tiffany, because what does that mean for her financially? But then
that's right.
My CFO is like, well, here's what the business is needing. And then my accountant is like, so it's like, I wanted to know so we can make the choice. So we decided my two core companies, one will be a C Corp, one will maintain an S Corp, because I will, you know what I mean? It'll allow me to take more money over here.
You're talking my language.
Girl, it's okay. Just, but you don't get
because you really are running a corporation. Yes. And I actually want to break it down for people because there's also probably a bunch of people who are influencers.
Yes.
And make money being themselves who are listening to this and they are in the LLC S Corp world. Mm-hmm. There's an inflection point where your revenue that's coming in and your expenses when you have employees and you have taxes and you're profitable, where you need to evaluate when it's time to actually build out the business.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just like, so for me,
pay yourself, W-2s. Yes.
And so, and also too, because sometimes you ask yourself, because everyone doesn't need to be a business. That was something I learned too. Because at one point I had this huge team. I was just talking to like Olivia about this. And I was like, we all had this notion that to be successful what meant to be big. You know, like I had a huge team. I had almost 30 people. I was like, I was exhausted. So stressful. And I realized that like, only one of my companies, like the Literature Academy, I think this is the bigger company, which, you know, I can see it can scale to be bigger and bigger. But honestly, the Budgetnista, I don't need her to do all that. I don't. It's just
and
me.
you might want to sell Literature Academy
yes,
one day.
I do.
You need it to be set up, right? Where you're actually able.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but these are things like, I was just literally thinking about this today. When you first start off and making money in your business, it's okay not to know all the things, that you collect this knowledge along the way, you know, that this is what it looks like. You know, this is what growth, this is what scaling, this is why having your advisors and mentors and sponsors, why it's so important, because as you grow, you learn. Like I am shrinking in some areas of my business, but without shame. If you would have told me 10 years ago, let's just be smaller. I'm like, no. That sounds like defeat. And now I'm like, no. I would love to be able to one day sell the Literature Academy, you know, not anytime soon, maybe 10 years from now or whatever. And then the Budgetnista is something that I do like on a whim. I'm like, oh, I feel like speaking. Oh, yeah, sure. I'll do some consulting.
I might write another book.
Exactly. And so I think the biggest thing that I tell my mentees is that first and foremost, you have to ask yourself, how do you want your life to go? I'm not talking about money, just your actual life. Do you want kids? Do you want to be married? Do you want to live a certain place, a certain way? Because your business and your money, you know, is there to serve your larger vision. And so many people have not identified that larger vision. And so I was sitting next to, and I wonder if, well, I won't say her name, but I was sitting next to a woman who sold her business for $1 billion at this Author for Author conference. She sold her business in 2016, $1 billion cash, by the way. And
that's
so
almost unheard of.
Unheard of, because her business was so buttoned up and so tight that the company, the multinational company that bought it was willing to pay $1 billion. She stayed on for 3 years. And she was sharing with me that, you know, it looked like, at least for 8 of the however many years she was in business, 8 of those years, she worked 100 hours a week. And that's that's being employed by 2.5 full-time jobs. And this woman is married. This woman has children. And when she told me that, she was talking, everybody was like, oh my gosh, so inspiring, da, da, da. But I could sense this undercurrent of sadness. I know because I have been there. And I said to her, can I ask you a question? She said, yes. I said, was it worth it? And she said, no.
Yeah, $1 billion versus 600 million. She probably would have rather had her time back.
I mean, she said no. Not no, but and sort of, she just said no.
She said no.
And I just thought to myself, because from this place, because we work so hard. That's the pinnacle of pinnacle. And then one day you ask yourself, do I even want that?
What are we doing?
What am I doing? Do I even want that? Yeah. And so I was so glad I got to, I knew that already, but it just reconfirmed for me that I have already made more than I ever thought possible. And I know because I'm smart and I have things in place that I'll continue to make more. I am not interested in more if it means overwork and overwhelm.
That's right. And I think that's so critical. I call that building your wealthy vision, right? It's like wealthy vision does not just mean how much cash you have in your bank. It's how much time do you have for your own freedom, for your personal agency, to rest, to play, to explore, to invest in other people, and not care if you lose the money. And you can work so hard, and maybe you do make 500 million, 300 million. You sell your business for 50 million in cash, but at what expense? And for what prolonged period of time?
And what have you lost as a result of
what have you lost
that?
along the way? Exactly. And I had to make that own evaluation for myself a couple of years ago, because when you raise money in venture world, then you're really committing to giving 10x back to your investors. So if you raise $10 million, you're committing to selling for, giving back $100 million, right? You raise $100 million, you're committing that your company is going to be worth like over $1 billion. Right. And the bigger you get, not everyone expects 10x, it goes down to 7, 5, 3, but raising money and continuing to do so was going to put me on a trajectory where I was going to be working 100 hours and also not necessarily in the control of my own destiny. I was going to be completely dependent on all of these investors that were going to be my board members and have to tell me what to do because I work for the board. Right? Now, taking yourself off the rat race has other consequences because it means you're working maybe at a lower rate, lower salary because you're building equity, but it does allow for more freedom over time. And so, major kudos to you and other people like Levy and others who have figured out how to be an entrepreneur and maintain the ownership in their business, because I know it's not easy with like the cash flow and taxes and figuring it all out. But I do really encourage people who are looking to raise venture capital to actually really think about what is your wealthy vision for yourself, because you will become an employee of this business. And the more you raise, the more you are an employee.
Basically there's a cost to every choice that you make, but you have to just weigh that cost and ask yourself if you're willing to pay it. That's what it comes down to.
That's right.
Whether, because everyone's like, oh, I want to start a business. I'm like, it is morally, emotionally, physically expensive. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying know that, like, I know you maybe you hate your 9 to 5 and there's a cost there as well, but don't think you're trading in and over here it's sunshine and lollipops all day and every day. No,
and we're just hanging out working remotely.
What I know, that's honestly, I hate that. I hate that that's what social media has shown to, like, potential business owners, and that, like, oh, I'm just by the beach every day. I have sat with people who take those pictures and then they say, let me, Tiffany, thanks for my camera, taking my picture, and they're back on their laptop. I used to bring my laptop with, always. There's no way that, like, you don't accidentally get to $10-20 million a year business. I used to bring my laptop with me food shopping because you never knew. I mean, everywhere I went, I remember distinctly when I was like, Tiffany, it's enough. I was at the doctor's office, just like for a regular checkup, in my gown or robe. I'm sitting there, laptop in my lap while I waited, because I was like, girl, work got to get done. She comes in, she said, like the tech came in and took my blood pressure. Meanwhile, while I'm like,
that's right.
Right. And so she said, your blood pressure is a little elevated. I was like, oh, probably because I ran up the stairs to get here. She's like, actually, last time you came, your blood pressure was a little elevated then. And I was like, she said, if you come back again, it's elevated. We're going to have to put you on blood pressure medication. Meanwhile, I was 40. I said, like an 80-year-old? My dad is 80, is not on blood pressure medication. And that's when I was like, what is happening? I was so stressed that I didn't even know I was stressed because it was an everyday feeling that I learned to manage it, that I'm like, I'm not stressed. It's not until now that through therapy, through relaxation, that I realized, wow, my body was always humming at like this like vibrational, like frantic mode, that now that I'm not in it, I'm like, I can't believe I was there for so many years. Like I was gonna have a heart attack, and I didn't. The doctor sent me home with a blood pressure machine. So she was like, I want you every morning to give me your numbers. And I thought it was broken because the numbers were so high. I had to literally call my stepdaughter. I was like, Liz, come use this machine. I'm like, dang, 120/80. Okay. I called my husband at the time. Babe, come use this machine. 120/80. Tiffany, 160/90. I'm talking about go to the hospital. I got so scared, I stopped taking it because I stopped using the machine. I didn't want to know. So I just said, you're going to have to make a decision. What really woke me up, and it shouldn't take this. This is just whether you're a business owner or where you work, or what really woke me up was when my husband passed away. I was like, what is it all for again? Like, because I had this awesome marriage. I think I was able to manage the stress of my professional life because at home it was amazing.
But you're in love.
Yes, it was an amazing marriage. And he was the king of it's enough. Like for me, for him, he was like, if you're good and baby girl's good, I'm good. But I didn't know what that looked like. And so with him not being here, I've just adopted like, yo, it's enough, Tiffany. It's enough. I want you to spend more time with family and friends. I want you to lean in. I take a 2-hour walk almost every day. I take a nap almost every day. I read books and I still make money. Maybe not as much, but it's enough.
Right. The opportunity cost of the more is not worth your peace of mind and your ease and your health.
Yeah.
I think that's so real. And I think that's a wake-up call for so many of us. And, unfortunately, sometimes it happens from tragic moments.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of people maybe felt it during COVID. That's when it happened for me, where I was like, this is not working. I do not like this.
Yeah.
I am leaving LA.
Yeah.
I am leaving this rat race. I'm going to go buy a house and grow tomatoes.
I love that.
Let's see how it goes.
I love that.
I can always move back.
Yes. The rat race literally never goes anywhere. That's the thing.
The rats are still running the rat race. It actually turns out, according to these protests, that y'all wasn't making money anyways.
Yes.
So what were we really doing?
Yes. It's true. It's funny.
What's really going on?
You think about that. Like so many people, some of your faves are not making what you think they're making.
Oh my gosh. These numbers are horrific.
Yeah.
Like people who I'm like, oh, you had to be doing something. Like you are on Hulu, you're on Netflix. And I'm not talking the extras. I mean like people that you're like, you would recognize them if you saw them in the library,
Yeah. And you're like, wait, what? 39,000? I'm telling you, as someone who's had a Netflix documentary and participated, the numbers that they offer up, you're like, say what now?
Yeah. People have tried to get me on shows, and as either it'll be like a Silicon Valley Housewives type show, or it'll be a like Black Girl in Business show. And we get into the negotiations with my agent, and they tell us the numbers, and I'm just like, wait, why would I do this?
Yes.
Like, you want me to give away my likeness? You want me to promote this TV show, your network?
Yes.
And you want me to stop working? I can't work. This has to be my primary obligation. They literally write that. Like, this has to be your first priority, which is like, bro, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Like, how is that possible? And then you get to the price and you're like,
the math is not mathing.
The math ain't mathing. And you're coming to Black female entrepreneurs and you think that people are going to say yes to this?
Yeah, it's crazy. Even with book deals, like, and I got a really good book deal, but honestly, it wasn't more than I couldn't have made on my own. And so I remember,
no way, not in a year.
No, it's about a 2-year payout. So I'm just like,
that's right.
So I was just, but that's not to me. Even my attorney, Tony, was like, "Girl, you sure?" I'm like, "I'm not doing it for the money." There was something specific that I wanted. That I was like, I wanted to make a New York Times bestseller, and I did. And I was like, because I knew that was going to elevate me and allow me to charge more, which it did. So it was an investment in like, okay, it's going to generate, not like I said, the income from the initial book, but it's going to elevate the brand in such a way that I can charge more. And I went from like a $50,000
Honorarium.
speaking to $100,000, and people paid it because they were like New York Times bestseller.
Let's
Yes,
go.
yes. And so I was like, okay,
so let's talk about the book.
Yes.
I finished my book.
Okay.
I sold it, obviously went through the whole auctioning process.
Okay.
I actually think that you and Lovey and Elaine, because your guys' book stood so well, the advances are looking quite juicy.
I heard that. I was like, ooh, I love that for Black girls.
Yeah, so I will say, I think you guys carried us.
Okay.
To be honest. So thank you for that. But to your point, it is really interesting than all the things that they're entitled to forever.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, I did maintain the IP for my book. That was what was really important for me because similar to what you've done, right? It's like, how do you build out the frameworks? How do you build out all these other parts of your franchise and your business?
Yes.
And if you don't own the IP for your book, then they're entitled to the residuals.
Yeah, same. Because I have online course. I was like, no. That's I was before you came. This is what I did. I even own the name. I've trademarked Get Good with Money, like all of that. I mean, certainly, like, you know, I can't resell the book. But it's the same because I was like, that was really important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people have to think about later. But anyways, the point is, so tell me about your process building your brand. So you were willing to do. I mean, writing a book is not a trivial amount of work. No. And I'm guessing that you were doing that also in a time when you were doing a lot of work. It's not like you could just go to, I don't know, go to Jamaica and sit there and write like a book in 3 weeks. Like, it's not really what it looks like. No. What was your decision-making process? And like, to your point earlier, what were the things that you were deciding, this book will enable me to do what?
So the book, I said I was never going to write a book until I was very definitive that I had something clear to say. I mean, I knew I had something clear to say, but there was something specific that I wanted to create a process. You know, the teacher in me was like, everyone keeps asking me the same questions. I want to create a process that someone could come to me with nothing and leave with all the things they need. Or if you came to me with something, but leave with all the things that you need. And then, but because I kept getting reached out to for years about doing a book. And then one day the process like came to me. And I wrote it down on a napkin. I remember because like this Uber was waiting for me. He's like, I'm outside. And I was like, it just came to me. And I started to write down the components of what is now financial wholeness. And these 10 core steps that if you master these steps, you don't have to be wealthy, but you will be okay. You know? And so that was like kind of like the opening. And then I was like, okay, so all these publishers are in my inbox, but I feel like I should get an agent. And I happened to be going to South by Southwest speaking on this like financial education panel with Jean Chatzky, who, if y'all remember, she's like the OG from, I think it's Today Show that she was, or Good Morning America. I can't remember where she used to be on. I think Today Show.
I think so.
And so she's
one of the morning shows.
Yes, OG morning show financial expert. And Jean is super nice. And I was like, hey, Jean, I have this book idea. I have all these people who are interested. And she was like, let me introduce you to my agent, Heather. She's a bulldog. I met Heather. She is indeed a bulldog. And was like, love you.
You need the agent.
Yes. And so a great way, certainly you can pitch agents blindly, but ideally if you know someone who's written a book, you know, they make that connection for you. And so because Jean made the connection, I at least got the call. You know, we got to sit down and have lunch. Now it's up to me to close it. But Heather was like, I love what you're doing. I looked you up obviously beforehand. And plus the fact that I already had, you know, book publishing companies.
List.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I had to write a proposal, which it took me longer, quite honestly, almost longer to write the proposal than it did the actual book.
Yes.
So I was like, I told Heather, I was like, I have like 3 bumping businesses right now. I don't know like how I'm going to be able, that was like my biggest worry. And she was like, I need the proposal. I said, could I just do like a 1 sheet? She's like, no, girl.
Okay, so let me tell everyone what the proposal is. So you have to write a proposal, which basically says, here's who I am. Yep. Here's all the books that are like the book that I'm going to write. Here's my first chapter, typically. Here's all the people who are going to say nice things about my book when it comes out.
Here's how I'm going to market it.
Here's how I'm going to market it. And like kind of here's how I'm going to contribute to the marketing to some extent. Yeah. So like I had to outline, for example, you know, we're going to go, I have all these corporate clients at Afrotech. We're going to make sure that they get the book, right? Because they're basically trying to see, well, how much are you going to make with corporate buys and speaking engagements?
Yes. And so also, so one thing Heather told me, which I was really glad for, she said, know that the more time you spend on the proposal, the easier it'll be to write the book. Because she's like, you can make it really light, but she was like, you're going to end up having to write the book. So what I did was I did a full flush out. So I did the
Wow.
first, like I did that first initial like chapter, like the welcome chapter or the introduction, but then
Right.
I fully
You wrote
fleshed
out
out
each
each
chapter.
and every chapter because it wasn't really
good.
so much for them as it was because when I had to write this book, I want to be ready to go. And as a
Yeah.
result, people loved that proposal so much. I didn't understand like the numbers of like this book pitching. And so all top 5 publishing companies came to the house. 9 said we want her.
Wow.
Yes.
So you were able to do the auction and everything and have
Yes.
a really fun day.
What? It was like, so it was almost a week of bidding. And it got to a bidding war between the last 2 big like publishers.
Oh my God, how fun. Okay, wait, you have to tell people this process because I was like, this is lit. Like, this is like selling a house.
Yes.
What
what
was
happens
your process
is,
like?
for me, because Heather said you have a great personality, she said, I won't do this with everybody, but I want you to physically meet them because I think you're going to like, they're going to love you. You'll win them over. So the publishing companies are all in New York. I live in Newark. So I just like almost every day we were going, I would sit, I would meet, and they'd be like, this is one of the best proposals we've ever read. You're funny. You're smart. You're this. Oh my gosh, your personality is so great. I can see it. And so she was like, we used to call it the razzle dazzle. She was like, let's wheel Tiffany out. Go ahead and do the razzle dazzle. Yeah, that's literally.
I'm doing the jig for this.
The razzle dazzle. And then at the end, Heather's like, let's see who actually comes to the table with money. All 9. She's like, in my 30 years, I've never seen all 9 come to the table with money. And I was like, okay. Incredible. And then slowly but surely over like a week and a half, they started to drop off because, the price just kept going up. And it got down to the last 2 largest book publishers. And I ended up choosing, I think at the end, they both were kind of stuck at the same price. I ended up choosing Penguin Random House. One, because they were the largest, but what I really liked about Penguin is that the big editor there, Marnie, was like, I don't want to just sell books with you, Tiffany. We want to raise your visibility. And so I like that. Right. She was like, we raise your visibility because I know it's going to end up in book sales. But I also wanted that. I'm like, I want to not just be like, I've got this great book, but here's Tiffany to the broader audience, And so, and they held true to that. I mean, still you have to do largely the work yourself, but they did a really good job of like making sure to push me forward as well as the book. And then writing the book.
And that's one of the things that I didn't know about the publishing industry that I learned was that they have lead titles every year.
Yes.
So you want to be one of those lead titles.
I didn't know that.
They're like, those people get the majority of the advertising budget and the marketing budget. And when they're booking TV shows, they're going to put their lead titles up. So you have to, this is why you have agents and advisors who do this every single day.
Yes.
And they take 10 to 15% or more, depending on, who you're with. But you're definitely the bid is definitely going up because you have someone running a process.
Exactly. And so I didn't know about the lead titles until one of my friends who like worked at Penguin was like, oh my God, I'm in a meeting and we're discussing the top 3 books that we're excited about this year. And it's you. I'm like, wait, what? She's like, so girl. So it was just amazing. And so, yes, I got this huge advance, relatively speaking. So just for context, $50,000, it's like, that's a fairly low advance. $100,000, what you would consider fair. Over 200. This is just for
author.
Yes. 250 is considered, okay, girl, we see you for a first time author. And it's a first time author who's not famous, who's not just, you're, even if you have like business success or whatever. So 250 is considered, that's really great. We see you. So anything really above that, you start to really be like, oh, okay, girl. And so,
we outside.
Yeah, we outside. But even then, at the time I was like excited about the money until I realized like when you really start doing the work, you're like, this is babysitting money.
Well, that's, and I think that's the hard part too, is like when you start making money, the numbers, you start to say, well, I could do 5 Instagram posts with a fintech company, in a year, or be an ambassador for a brand.
Girl.
And you're going to pay me $200. So,
girl, I've got brand ambassador work for $400,000. So I was like, girl, I could do 2 of these. But like I said, for me, the end goal was I wanted to raise the visibility of the brand. And I want you to put some respect on my name that there's a lot of financial educators out there, but one who has a New York Times bestseller, there is a stamp of approval that you get that like, oh, now CNN, like I just got a call randomly. This, somebody from CNN was like, real quick, can we do a quick story? And so, but you get those things because they're like, because Tiffany, New York Times bestseller Tiffany is who we're calling, not like just financial influencer Tiffany, which is no shade to financial influencer because it's paid well, but I wanted, and it allowed me to get, the Netflix documentary, which they called Get Smart with Money. They wanted to call it Get Good with Money. I'm like, y'all tried it. Yes, but I like that they called it Get Smart with Money because it closely aligns. My book sales skyrocketed as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so since then, I mean, the book has done nearly 300,000 copies in 2 years, which is like unheard of.
Wow. Incredible numbers.
And we're still doing on average about 1,000 sales a week. 2
And
years
that's what you
later.
really want. You don't want a one hitter
No.
quitter done. You want to have
Perennial
you want a
sellers,
book
what they
that's
call it.
like, yeah, and you want a book that like in 5 years when someone's graduating, I'm like, you need this book.
Yes, and that's you. So even when you're thinking about doing a book, I mean, you get to decide, of course, what kind of book. But I distinctly wanted a perennial seller. I told Heather, my agent, when I met her, I want the 4-hour work week. That's what I told her. I want a book that years and years and years from now. And I also wanted to pay back my advance, although it was large, because I wanted to be like, well, what does that look like for my little back end? And so we paid it back in about a year and a half. It took us to pay back the advance because we sold so much. And as a result, now every Penguin does twice a year. You'll get your author check, basically, which is not a ton. Because typically,
sure, but it's not pennies.
Yes, especially if you continue to sell 1,000. I'll tell you the percentage that you usually get off the back end of a book is about 15% off the back end. But some people
that's still a good percent. Some people don't get that.
Yeah, some people. I didn't know that because I was like, "That's it." Heather was like, "Girl, that's the most they really give." And so now, you figure, your book is $20-something. You sell 1,000 a week, you get 15%. Like I know, like my friend Ramit, he's awesome. His book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, came out in 2009, and he is still selling like it just came out.
And I love his newsletter. If you're not on Ramit's newsletter, get on his newsletter. Even if you never buy one of his courses, just like he's just so personable.
Yes, he's awesome. Like he was at the Author for Author luncheon as well. And so
I guess I have to have a New York Times bestseller to get to
Well, it was just like I just think that there are so many opportunities. I just see so many of us, especially if you're Black or brown, sometimes we feel so limited in what we have access to. But I say that with your genius, you can lean in. One of the things I'm proud of is that, especially like I know like the Blavity audience, Afrotech, it's not just Black, but I love the fact that is the core audience, because people told me you will not be successful if you make that your focus. And I'm like, well, $50 million later, I beg to differ, but okay, girl, go off. That it is possible to say, I want my core audience to serve my people. I don't turn anyone away. We certainly have a wider audience in general, but I want my core audience to do this. I want to do good work in this space, but I also want to make money. It is possible.
It's absolutely possible. And it's also not only, right? There's plenty of white women that are super fans of yours.
Yes, they are.
Just like there's plenty of people, there's men who listen to this podcast. Someone's like, is this a podcast just for one? I'm like, absolutely not.
Nope.
I have a lot of men that listen to my stuff because it's about if you do good work and you have good results. That's what really is the most important.
That's why I was nervous. Are you going to be on the cover of your book?
No.
Okay. I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I don't want to be. But Penguin was like, no, you got to be.
Well, I could understand why you wouldn't want to be. And I understand why they would want to put you on. I am 6 months pregnant. So the timing doesn't add up.
Okay.
Like, we don't want pregnant Morgan.
Because then you're just like, oh, and she's just pregnant for the rest of her life as the book lives on.
Like that's not cute. But also, and I didn't want to delay. It's going to hopefully come out next fall. So I didn't want to delay, like, you got to do all the things. But I also felt like, to your point, when I was writing this book, I didn't want it to just be a like Black entrepreneur. Hear me roar. Everything is hard, but you can do it. Like that's not what the book is, and it's a framework. You want to teach a methodology, you want to teach a framework and explain through your life how this framework is played out, or through the mentees that you have, the people you've interacted with along the way. I
was scared of that too. I was like, I didn't want this to just be like, I know my core audience is Black women and that's intentional, but the book itself, I wanted it to reach a wider audience. And I was just like, not whiter, wider, just so we're clear. Wider, yes.
Don't you come for her.
I know, because like, wait, what? I'm like, just a white, that's also 2 men, and I just thought, if I'm on this book, I don't know. And certainly at first it was my audience that pushed it forward. But what you learn is that if something is good, your core audience gets it. And then they tell their white best friend, Sarah. And then Sarah tells her husband, Tim. And before you know, because people have come up to me and I'm like, wait, one of my favorite
But it's
Audible.
so different than us reading Profit First.
Exactly.
where I'm like, I don't care what this man looks
Yes.
like. I love Profit First.
Yes.
Every entrepreneur I know, I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Did you read Profit First?
Yes. And sidebar, he is hilarious. Who wrote
Is
Profit?
he?
But yes, I got to meet him for the first time. I'm like, Mike, you are the
Now
silliest.
I have FOMO. Who runs this? Who do I need to stalk and become fake Instagram
I'm gonna connect you because,
with?
like, next year, like, yeah, it just was such an awesome. That too is like why doing the work is so important, because you get invited into rooms that you might not otherwise have access to.
Right.
You know,
right.
And so like not for the look of it, but really for like I learned so much, and I was just like, I didn't know that you could do that. Wait, what? So it was just like an amazing experience. So certainly I'll share some of the things I learned, because it was just me and Lovey were like, as a matter of fact, I owe her my notes. I told her I'm going to type them up and we're going to swap notes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think the takeaway for anyone who's listening in, who's like, okay, girls, like you're the best of the best. We get it. The point is not us. Don't be us. The point is find your tribe at that next level. And when you leapfrog yourself, when all of a sudden you find yourself in a new situation, Tiffany found herself as a New York Times bestseller. That's a new situation. But there's other people who are New York Times bestsellers, right? And they have done this 2 times over, and they have friends who've done this 2 times over. Yeah. So surrounding yourself with those people, you're gonna come in as a freshman into this class when you previously were the biggest boy on campus, and now you're like, oh my God, it's a whole thing, right? And I think that's true at no matter what level you are, whether you're the teacher, you're the principal, whether you are working at corporate, at Target in Minneapolis, whatever you're doing, there's always a peer group. And then when you get to the next level, there's another peer group. There's a book that I recommend to people. I gave it to my employees a couple years ago. I give a book every Christmas holiday as my gift. Okay. And it's called Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
I love that book.
Do you?
I love that book. Whole thing. Yes.
I don't know that I've ever met another Black person who knows what I'm talking about.
I love that book. I read about just about every year because yes, it has the same kind of energy and vibe as The Alchemist. Because I had the reason why I know about it is just because I posted on Facebook many moons ago, because Facebook, like who was on it, and I posted. I said I just finished reading The Alchemist, and I want a book with the same underlying energy of like storytelling and growth. And then someone suggested, a sister was like, read Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's going to sound stupid because it's about a seagull, but it's so good. And I was like, I guess, girl, I love that book. So I've never met another person either that's read it that I have not recommended it.
Shocked. I know. I love that book so much, and I read it every year. It's a quick read. It's a plain read. Yes. It's literally, you can read front to back on a plane. Yep. And every time I see a seagull when I'm walking, I'm like, hey, Jonathan, you fly so high.
While the rest of these seagulls are squawking on the beach, fighting over. Yes. I love
Go do cartwheels in the sky. So anyways, y'all go ahead and read this book so you don't think Tiffany and I are nuts. And then let us know.
Yes. And get good with money. Hello, get that book as well. Get your life together.
And definitely get good with money. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so fun. My biggest takeaways of our conversation, one, make sure that you have your advisors in place. And even if you are early in your career, you're early in your wealth building journey, consider books, consider podcasts, consider free resources that are available to you, or more accessible resources that are available to you, so you can start to design your wealthy vision and have a plan for where you want to go. And then have the help along the way. And then 2, as you're thinking about, once you get past that initial foundation of financial health and wealth, then you're starting to think about the next phase of your life. Continue to work backwards from your plan and constantly reevaluate it and say, okay, what's my baseline? What's my worst case scenario? Just like Tiffany was saying, her worst case scenario is like, I take on coaching clients. My baseline is this, right? Okay, good. That should give you some emotional, mental stability to then be able to take some bigger risks so that you can get to your end goal faster and not be as scared about taking leaps, whether that's starting a side hustle, whether that's moving to a new city that's got a lower cost of living, whatever that might mean for you. And then lastly, the book game is really interesting, friends. Consider designing your own framework, your own methodology, writing it down and getting comfortable communicating it. And there's a lot of benefits to actually building a brand as an expert beyond just having an Instagram following our newsletter.
Can I add a 4th one?
Yes.
4th one is that design your holistic life, because all of these other components are there to serve that life, not the other way around. You are not to be a servant of these like external markers of success. Like they are there to serve your holistic life. How many walks do you want to take? How often do you want to play with your kids? Like how many books you want to read a week? Like design that life and then say, hey, this professional, this financial, this external part of my life, you need to serve that life.
Absolutely. All right, Tiffany, thanks so much.
Thank you. Can I tell the people where to come see me?
Of course.
So
buy the book.
I am the Budgetnista on all the social platforms. Probably Instagram is my favorite, and thebudgetnista.com. And I do have a podcast where my friend Mandy and I talk about money, business, career, like just being two Black and brown girls out here. It's called Brown Ambition. So I hope to see you out here in these social media, podcast, internet streets. Thank you,
Yes,
Morgan.
and we had Mandy on a couple weeks ago. Okay. So go back and listen to Mandy's episode as well. She just gave birth. So
she did to my little Remy. Life. I know, her little baby's so cute.
So cute. But yes, download their podcast, leave them a review, leave me a review, do all the things that you're supposed to do because we do this for free because we love you. And I'll catch y'all next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Journey Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review and head to our Instagram and YouTube to leave a comment. I look forward to hearing how this podcast has made an impact on your own journey.